Aoc hit with new criminal charges. Pam Bondi led her into a trap. The room was full. Before sunrise, cameras blinked, journalists whispered. The buzz in the air was electric, sharp, almost painful. Every seat in the congressional chamber was filled, and every eye was locked on one woman, Pam Bondi. She sat at the head of the committee, composed and still. Her suit was crisp, her folders were stacked. She wasn't here to debate. She was here to dismantle. Across from her, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, looked like the perfect contrast. Calm, confident, legs crossed, that familiar smirk on her face. The one she wore every time she knew millions were watching. Pam didn't acknowledge the smirk. She didn't need to. She adjusted her mic. "Representative Ocasio-Cortez," she said, her voice slicing through the air. "You are here today to respond to serious allegations involving the employment of an undocumented worker in your office, obstruction of a federal investigation, and potential misuse of campaign funds." No gasps. Not yet. The chamber leaned in. AOC responded with a soft chuckle. "With all due respect, Chairwoman Bondi, this sounds more like a Fox News segment than a federal hearing." Pam smiled, not a real smile. The kind of smile lawyers wear when they know what's coming next. "Oh, I assure you," she said calmly. "This won't be entertaining for you." She tapped her tablet. The screen behind her came alive with a photo. A man sat at a desk inside AOC's office, neatly dressed, focused. His name printed in bold across the corner, Diego Dega. Pam looked back at AOC. "Is this man known to you?" AOC barely glanced at the screen. "He was a staff assistant. One of many." Pam nodded. "Did you know Mr. Dega was not legally authorized to work in the United States?" AOC's response was immediate. "I don't personally vet every intern or assistant. That's not my role." Another tap. A new image, an email. "We need to keep Diego on staff. I'll handle the paperwork. Office of Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez." The chamber stirred. AOC kept her posture. "Context matters," she said. "You're cherry-picking lines to paint a narrative." Pam leaned forward. "And what narrative would that be? That a sitting member of Congress deliberately ignored immigration law to retain an illegal employee? That I care about people," AOC snapped. "That I give second chances. That I don't dehumanize workers for political gain." Pam tilted her head. "Second chances are noble. Breaking federal law is not." The room shifted. Journalists typed faster. Cameras zoomed in. Pam wasn't finished. "This isn't about one hire," she said. "It's about what followed." Another click. The screen now showed a second email, this time from AOC's legal team. "Diego does not have legal documents. We could be in trouble if someone finds out." AOC's expression didn't change, but her hands gripped the desk a little tighter. Pam gave no space to breathe. "Did you instruct your staff to delete records related to Mr. Dega?" "I did not," AOC said flatly. Pam clicked again. "Delete all data related to Diego. Office of Representative AOC." The silence that followed was thick. "I didn't write that," AOC said, voice still controlled. "No," Pam said. "But it came from your office. Your name. Your responsibility." AOC leaned forward. "Let's not pretend this hearing is about Diego. This is about silencing voices that challenge the system." Pam raised a brow. "Is that your defense? That this is a political hit job?" "No," AOC said, her voice louder now. "This is a witch hunt disguised as oversight." Pam didn't blink. "Then let em bring the firewood." She tapped the screen again, a new image. Campaign fund transactions. Line after line of transfers. Money that was supposed to support outreach turned instead to fund an organization tied to undocumented legal support. AOC opened her mouth, but Pam cut her off. "We'll get to that," she said. "But first, let's finish with Diego." She paused, eyes locked on AOC. "You didn't just hire an undocumented worker. You protected him. You erased him. And when things got risky, you covered it up." The room was dead silent. AOC exhaled. "This is absurd." Pam leaned in. "Then you won't mind proving it." And with that, she clicked again, this time playing a video of AOC at a rally. "If IC knocks on your door, don't open it. Don't sign anything. They have no power unless you give it to them." Gasps. Whispers. The sound of headlines being born. AOC turned away from the screen, then back to Pam. "That," she said slowly, "was about knowing your rights." Pam smiled again. "And yet, after that rally, hundreds of undocumented immigrants disappeared from ICE's watch list. Funny coincidence." She let it hang, then leaned back, folder still closed. This hearing is just getting started. For a moment, no one spoke. The screen behind Pam Bondi was frozen on a still image of AOC. Mid-pose, finger raised, rallying a crowd under a massive banner. Know your rights. The video had paused just after she told undocumented immigrants not to open the door for ICE. It wasn't just a soundbite anymore. Now it was evidence. Pam adjusted her microphone, her voice calm, deliberate. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, do you believe encouraging individuals to avoid federal law enforcement is a responsible use of your platform? AOC didn't flinch. What I encouraged was legal awareness. People in this country, regardless of their status, still have constitutional protections. They have the right to not incriminate themselves. That's not evasion. That's education. Pam nodded slightly, as if indulging a child. And yet, within days of that rally, ICE reported the disappearance of over 300 individuals from their active monitoring list, all from districts where you held those events. AOC raised an eyebrow. Are you seriously suggesting that a public Know Your Rights seminar caused a mass vanishing act? I'm suggesting that your influence has consequences, Pam replied. And I'm asking whether you're willing to take responsibility for them. AOC smirked, but it didn't reach her eyes. If speaking the truth leads to fear, that's not on me. That's on the system you're defending. Pam clicked again. This time, it wasn't a video. It was a statement signed and dated by a former staffer from AOC's office. I was instructed to erase all internal records related to Diego Dega. The directive came from senior aides, referencing concerns from the Congresswoman herself. A murmur rolled through the room. Pam let it settle before speaking. This is now more than negligence. This is an active cover-up. Your office deleted evidence connected to an ongoing investigation. That's obstruction of justice. AOC's response was sharper this time. My staff handles hundreds of requests, forms, and changes daily. If something was deleted, it was procedural, not malicious. I do not sit at a computer deleting files. Pam leaned forward, eyes cold. Then you're either willfully blind or willfully complicit. Neither looks good. The tension in the room thickened. The press box looked like a battlefield of flying fingers and blinking screens. Headlines were already forming. Pam flipped a page in her folder. Let's talk about finances. Another click. A spreadsheet appeared. Wire transfers, line items, dollar signs. Your campaign raised over $4 million last quarter, Pam began, but $2.0 million was funneled to an organization called Justice Forward, which, according to IRS filings, provides logistical and legal support for undocumented immigrants actively avoiding deportation. AOC leaned back slowly, exhaling. Justice Forward is a nonprofit that defends human rights. It operates within the law. Pam didn't blink. Then explain why their own tax documents list confidential housing relocation and secure communication as core expenses. Services used specifically to hide individuals from ICE surveillance. That's not hiding, AOC shot back. That's protection. These are families, mothers, children. Pam's tone sharpened. These are individuals violating federal law. You used campaign donations meant for voter outreach to fund a group helping them disappear. I used funds to help people live without fear. And you bypassed campaign finance restrictions in the process. AOC's expression flickered. Pam clicked again. Now on the screen, an internal campaign memo from one of AOC's senior staffers. Move the Justice Forward disbursement under community engagement. Avoids PR backlash. Gasps. AOC finally raised her voice. Let's be real, this isn't about campaign finance. It's about political revenge. You've wanted to see someone like me fall since the day I got here. Pam stayed perfectly still. No, Congresswoman. I want to see someone like you held to the same standards as everyone else. She stood up from her chair, slowly walking toward the center of the room. All eyes followed her. You talk about justice, yet you ignore laws you don't agree with. You talk about transparency, but you hide behind your staff when the evidence gets inconvenient. You talk about fighting for the people, but what people exactly? AOC opened her mouth, but Pam wasn't finished. You hired an undocumented worker. You kept him despite warnings. You allowed sensitive documents to be erased. You funneled money into an organization designed to help those evade the very system you claim to serve. And when questioned, your only defense is, this is political. AOC stood now too, voice rising. I fight for those this system forgets. I don't apologize for that. You don't get to rewrite the law just because you don't like it. I challenge the law when it fails the people. Pam leaned forward slightly, voice lower, colder. Then maybe it's time the law challenges you back. Silence. The two women stood across from each other, one unwavering in her prosecution, the other burning with indignation. But something had shifted. AOC's confidence had slipped. Just slightly. Enough to notice. Enough to write about. Pam returned to her seat and spoke again. This committee will recess for 1 hour. Upon return, we will introduce new testimony and discuss potential criminal referrals. She paused, then added with clinical precision. And if the Congresswoman would like to consult legal counsel in the meantime, I'd suggest doing so now. The gavel came down. The session paused. But the cracks, they were already spreading. The committee reconvened at exactly 11. The mood in the room had changed. What began as political spectacle now crackled with the tension of a trial. The air was sharp, like just before lightning strikes. Pam Bondi returned to her seat calmly. No rush, no wasted motion. She had the rhythm of a veteran prosecutor who knew her case was airtight, and that her opponent was running out of room. Across from her, AOC was back in place, still collected, still polished. But gone was the smirk. Her gaze was steady, almost blank. She didn't look shaken. She looked calculating. Pam opened the session. Congresswoman, she began. Before recess, we discussed the hiring of Mr. Diego Dega and the deletion of his records. We received new corroborating materials over the break, including a sworn affidavit from a former senior aide. The screen behind her lit up. A document appeared. The signature at the bottom, unmistakable. Under direct instruction from Representative Ocasio-Cortez, staff were told to remove internal files referencing Diego Dega to prevent potential PR fallout. AOC didn't react. But the chamber did. Whispers. Typing. More whispers. Pam tapped the document. This was submitted under oath. The consequences for perjury are severe. So, unless you're prepared to call your former chief of staff a liar. AOC leaned in. I'm saying that statement was taken out of context. Political staffers interpret pressure however they want. It doesn't mean I ordered anything. Pam didn't blink. Then perhaps we should let the DOJ decide what qualifies as obstruction. AOC raised her eyebrows slightly, but said nothing. Pam moved on. Let's shift to campaign finance. A few minutes ago, you claimed your disbursements to Justice Forward were for human rights work. But we now have wired data and receipts indicating that over $280,000 of those funds went specifically to secure housing and legal support for undocumented individuals under active deportation orders. Another document flashed on screen, a payment record labeled Relocation Assistance, Confidential Clients. Would you like to clarify that entry, Congresswoman? AOC's voice remained steady. Yes, those services were provided to individuals with no criminal history, many of them children or parents of U.S. citizens. They were not threats, they were terrified families. Pam nodded slowly. So, to be clear, you knowingly used campaign donations to provide aid to individuals who were by law subject to removal? I used my platform to protect people abandoned by the system. Pam narrowed her eyes. That's not what I asked. AOC's jaw tightened. Yes, I authorized the payments. It was quiet, for a beat too long. Pam took a breath. Thank you. That will be relevant when we discuss possible FEC violations and financial misconduct. She clicked again. Now the screen showed a freeze frame from a hidden camera video inside a campaign office. AOC speaking candidly to a small group. We move funds around all the time. It's about optics. As long as we label it Community Support Report, the press won't dig. AOC snapped her head toward the screen. That video was recorded without consent. It's misleading. Pam replied without missing a beat. But is it false? AOC's silence was louder than any denial. Pam leaned in. You've built a brand around transparency, around truth to power. But your words here, they don't reflect a truth teller. They reflect someone gaming the system. AOC's voice turned sharp. Every politician in this room moves money around. You want to pretend it's shocking because it's me? Pam stood. She wasn't just addressing AOC now. She turned slightly toward the press gallery, the committee, the cameras broadcasting live. No, Congresswoman, it's shocking because of what you did with it. She held up another folder. We obtained an internal communication from the accounting team of Justice Forward. It describes your office's involvement as a strategic asset reallocation. The language isn't just questionable, it's deliberate. The The screen lit up again. Ensure AOC transfers are labeled community education. Hide the immigration ties. It was signed, dated, and sourced. Pam sat back down. That's not protecting people. That's laundering political liability. AOC crossed her arms tightly, responding through gritted teeth. You want to paint this as corruption, but the truth is, I was trying to help people who had nowhere else to turn. And you turned campaign donations into cover for it, Pam snapped. That's not compassion, that's exploitation. Another silence. Then Pam clicked again. The room gasped. This time it was a video, not of AOC but of Diego DA himself. Pre-recorded testimony, seated before a plain white wall. The timestamp read just 3 days prior. I worked in Representative Ocasio-Cortez's office for nearly a year. I wasn't authorized to work, and she knew it. We talked about it. She told me not to worry, said she had people who could handle the paperwork. When I started investigating, I was told to stay low and stop using internal systems. AOC stiffened. Who submitted this video? She asked sharply. Pam answered without emotion. Diego did, through a pro bono legal team working with congressional oversight. She's using a scared kid to justify a witch hunt, AOC muttered. Pam didn't engage. Congresswoman, she said, you've tried to frame this as political persecution. But what's becoming increasingly clear is that this was political protectionism. For yourself, not your constituents. She stood again. You broke the rules you swore to uphold. You erased the evidence. And when confronted, you wrapped yourself in slogans and sympathy. AOC opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, another voice cut through the room. Madam Chair, a voice called from the gallery. The DOJ has confirmed receipt of all preliminary documents. Pam nodded once, then looked at AOC. You're no longer the one asking questions, Congresswoman, she said quietly. You're the one answering them. The gavel struck. The hearing was adjourned for the day, but the fire had already been lit. The next morning, the air was heavier. Everyone knew what was coming now. This wasn't an inquiry anymore. It was a political trial unfolding on live television. It had gone beyond rumors, beyond rhetoric. The buzzword of the day was different, criminal. Pam Bondi entered the chamber as calmly as ever, poised, focused, efficient. The stack of folders beside her had thinned. She didn't need more evidence, just the final, crushing moments of clarity. Across the room, AOC arrived late. Not by much, but enough to signal defiance. Her hair was pinned tighter, her blazer darker. She moved like someone trying to armor herself with style, as if fabric could stop truth. But her eyes gave her away. Still fierce, still unbroken, but flickering. She didn't speak right away. She allowed silence to do the work for her. Then finally she began. Yesterday, this committee heard sworn testimony and reviewed financial records implicating Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in multiple ethics violations. Today, we will present the final segment of evidence before a recommendation is made. AOC folded her hands on the table. Her voice was calm but clipped. Before you read the next headline into the record, Madam Chair, may I speak? Pam gestured, ever the procedural pro. Go ahead. AOC stood. I won't pretend to enjoy these proceedings, but I will stand by everything I've done. I've never pretended to be perfect, but I've always acted from conscience. She looked around the chamber. Some of you are enjoying this. You think you found your viral moment. You think you're watching a fall. But this isn't a fall, it's a fight. Pam nodded slowly. Well said. But this fight isn't rhetorical, Congresswoman. It's evidentiary. And with that, she clicked her tablet. A new slide appeared on the monitor behind her. A list of encrypted chat logs from AOC's campaign team. One stood out. Recode the transfers. Rebrand them as educational, she said. To make it invisible. Pam's voice was like a scalpel. These aren't just financial errors. They're deliberate attempts to hide the true nature of your expenditures. That's campaign fraud. AOC remained standing. Anyone can send a message. It doesn't mean I read it. It doesn't mean I approved it. Pam raised a brow. But it was implemented. Another click. Now, a financial receipt labeled Justice Forward Outreach, marked approved by AOC's office. Do you deny signing off on this? I reviewed hundreds of payments. That one, I can't confirm. Pam tapped her desk lightly. Convenient. Selected memory always appears right on time. From the Democratic side, murmurs of protest bubbled up. Ilhan Omar leaned into her mic. Madam Chair, this process is biased. It's targeting a Latina progressive for doing what others have done without consequence. Pam didn't even glance her way. Representative Omar, this hearing is based on evidence, not ethnicity. Omar shot back. The public can see what this is, a partisan takedown wrapped in procedure. Pam allowed herself a breath before responding. No, Representative. It's accountability. And if you have evidence to exonerate your colleague, present it. Otherwise, kindly refrain from impugning this committee's integrity. Silence returned. For a second, even AOC looked at Omar, like she'd made things worse. Pam clicked again. A new witness appeared via live video. A middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a crisp voice. Please state your name, Pam said. Carmen Salazar, the woman answered. And did you have contact with Representative Ocasio-Cortez? Yes, multiple times. What were those conversations about? Carmen hesitated, then answered. Firmly, she instructed us to prioritize undocumented clients. She said, and I quote, just make sure none of it links back to federal money. Gasps again. AOC slammed her hand lightly on the table. That's false. I never said that. Pam turned to Carmen. Do you have proof? Yes, Carmen said. I recorded the call. It's been authenticated and submitted. Pam didn't need to play it, not yet. Instead, she focused on AOC. You've accused this process of bias, but the record is what it is. Are we to believe that your voice, your approval, your signature, none of it reflects your intentions? AOC's voice shook, but not with fear, with anger. You've turned this into a circus. I fought for families living in fear, and now you want to paint me as a criminal because I dared to care. Pam raised an eyebrow. No, we're here because you cared more about optics than the oath you swore. AOC stepped forward from the desk. I am not afraid of your committee. I am not afraid of your files. I'm afraid of what happens when people like me stop fighting. Pam's voice went colder. And I'm afraid of what happens when leaders believe they're above the law, she paused. Because that's how democracies die. The chamber fell still again. Outside, the press was already reporting. Headlines were forming. Reactions were flying across social media. But inside, the storm was just beginning. Pam sat back down and turned toward the other committee members. Members of the committee, we will now enter deliberations. She looked once more at AOC. You may remain or step outside while we confer, but I suggest you prepare for what comes next. AOC didn't move. Pam didn't either. They stared at each other, the investigator and the investigated. Two ideologies. Two Americas. And between them, a line was drawn, one made of law, the other defiance. The committee reconvened after a brief closed-door session. When they returned, the atmosphere in the chamber was entirely different. Gone was the pretense of political theater. The tension had curdled into something more dangerous, finality. The crowd felt it. The reporters sensed it. Even the marble walls, stoic and cold, seemed to hum with anticipation. Pam Bondi took her seat, lips pressed into a thin, unreadable line. No more posturing. No more pauses for dramatic effect. This was the part where power stopped being spoken and started being enforced. AOC remained at her table, still upright, still composed, but her stillness now had a brittle edge like a structure too rigid to bend without snapping. Pam adjusted her mic. This committee has reached a preliminary conclusion regarding the conduct of Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. All movement in the room ceased. She continued. Based on testimonial evidence, financial documents, deleted records, and multiple staff affidavits, the Oversight Subcommittee recommends the referral of this matter to the Department of Justice for further investigation under potential charges of. She lifted a page. Obstruction of justice, misuse of federal campaign funds, and knowing employment of an undocumented individual. No gasps this time. Only silence. That raw, stunned kind of silence that only happens when something once unthinkable suddenly becomes real. AOC closed her eyes for a beat. Just long enough to register it. Pam wasn't finished. Congresswoman, you will retain your seat pending the DOJ's decision. However, your security clearances and committee privileges are to be suspended immediately. She placed the document flat on the table. Effective today. AOC leaned into her microphone. This is a vendetta, not justice. Pam responded coolly. No, Congresswoman. This is what accountability looks like. A pause. Then, from the Democratic side of the aisle, Ilhan Omar rose. This is an outrage, she declared. A member of this chamber, elected by the people, is being targeted for her beliefs, for her community, for being too bold, too progressive. Pam turned her head slowly toward Omar. If Representative Ocasio-Cortez is innocent, the DOJ will say so. That's how the system works. Omar shook her head. It's only justice when it protects the powerful. Pam didn't argue. She didn't have to. Instead, she turned back to the center of the room and tapped her screen one final time. A new document appeared. An internal email from AOC's campaign finance director. Remove all traces of the Justice Forward payments before the FEC audit. Archive staff chat threads. The subject line, urgent, AOC finance flag. Pam glanced at AOC. Was that just community engagement too? AOC didn't respond. She didn't need to. The weight of silence now answered for her. The press gallery erupted into furious typing. Phones lit up. The headline was already forming in real time. Pam Bondi gathered her notes, but before she stood, she said one last thing. Congresswoman, this isn't personal. It never was. It's about the trust placed in you by the people. You used that trust to build a brand, a movement, a voice. But somewhere along the way, the truth became optional. She stood. And now, truth is all that matters. AOC rose too, but there was no speech this time. No defiance. No passionate declaration. Just the steady rise of a woman who had entered politics as a firestorm and now stood in its ashes. A reporter shouted, Congresswoman, do you deny the charges? She didn't answer. A second voice. Will you resign? Still nothing. Pam turned to the clerk. Submit the final report to the Justice Department by end of day. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel struck. And just like that, it was over. But outside, the real collapse had only just begun. The moment AOC stepped through the chamber doors, a wall of microphones and cameras descended. Congresswoman, are you under arrest? Do you blame this on Republicans? What's your next move? She pushed forward without a word. Inside, Bondi exited through a side door, away from the chaos. Her face was calm, unreadable. But deep inside, she knew this wasn't victory. Not yet. The real battle would now move into the courts, and the court of public opinion. Still, today had shifted something. Not just for AOC, but for Congress, for the movement she represented, for the people who once chanted her name as a battle cry. Pam Bondi paused briefly at the marble steps outside the Capitol. Below, protesters were already shouting, some defending AOC, others waving signs demanding resignation. The crowd was split. The country was split. The lines had been drawn. But Pam knew one thing. Accountability had found its target. It hadn't been missed. Outside the Capitol, storm clouds gathered. It wasn't the weather. It was the press, the protests, the rage. AOC had left the chamber hours ago, but the tremors of what had happened inside were only beginning to ripple through the country. TV anchors scrambled to cover every second. Twitter trended with hashtags on both sides. Supporters called it a witch hunt. Critics called it justice. Inside her office, Pam Bondi reviewed the final paperwork in silence. She didn't smile. She didn't relax. There was no satisfaction in this, only certainty. What needed to happen had happened. Her staffer stepped in. DOJ confirmed receipt of the case file. They'll issue a statement within 24 hours. Pam nodded without looking up. Thank you. Then she stood. She knew what would come next. Interviews, spin, threats, even praise from people she didn't want praise from. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the record, the evidence, the process. What mattered was that someone powerful had finally been held to account. Later that evening, she appeared on national television. The interviewer was sharp, hungry for ratings. Chairwoman Bondi, he began. Some are calling this the end of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's political career. Others say it's just the beginning of a martyr campaign. What do you say? Pam looked directly into the camera. I say we followed the facts. He leaned forward. Do you believe AOC broke the law? Pam didn't blink. I believe there is enough evidence to warrant a criminal investigation. And I believe that if her name were anything other than Ocasio-Cortez, this would have happened years ago. The host hesitated. Is this political for you? Pam shook her head. No, it's constitutional. The camera zoomed slightly. Her voice grew colder. This was never about a party, it was about power. And whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, you do not get to weaponize compassion as cover for corruption. You do not get to wrap yourself in activism while violating the oath you swore. He tried to pivot. Do you worry this sets a precedent for political retaliation? Pam smiled faintly. The only precedent this sets is that the rules apply to everyone, even the loudest voices. The broadcast ended, but the internet didn't. Clips of Pam's closing remarks spread like wildfire. Supporters hailed her as fearless. Critics accused her of persecution. Editorials exploded on both sides of the aisle. But one clip in particular went viral. You don't get to rewrite the law just because you speak louder than everyone else. Meanwhile, AOC had gone dark. No tweets. No press releases. Her office issued a brief statement denying all wrongdoing and calling the hearing a right-wing spectacle designed to distract from real crises. But even her usual defenders seemed quieter now. The New York Times ran a cautious headline. Ocasio-Cortez faces DOJ probe. Legal firestorm or political trap? The Washington Post, less generous. The fall of AOC. Questions mount as evidence piles up. Behind closed doors, her staff scrambled. Donors pulled back. Allies distanced themselves. The progressive wing of her party was now split, some doubling down, others stepping away. Even her own district buzzed with doubt. A week later, she held a press conference. It was brief, carefully worded. No fire, no firebrand. I will cooperate fully, she said. I maintain my innocence. I will not resign. My fight has always been for the people. But it didn't hit like before. The rhythm was there. The words were polished. But something was missing. The invincibility, that was gone. Pam Bondi, meanwhile, returned to work like nothing had happened. She declined most interviews. Refused book deals. Didn't gloat. She let the record speak for itself. But she did issue one final statement to the press, just a few lines, quiet, controlled. But it landed like a thunderclap. Accountability isn't partisan, it's patriotic. If the law doesn't apply to our leaders, it ceases to protect our people. The story would stretch for months. Legal analysts debated whether charges would stick. Cable news turned the hearing into an ongoing saga. AOC, now under DOJ review, saw her political influence freeze. Her name, once synonymous with disruption and revolution, was now attached to words like misconduct, cover-up, and fraud. But the moment was bigger than her. It was about something deeper. Can ideals excuse illegal actions? Can popularity shield you from prosecution? Pam Bondi had made her answer clear. And America had heard it. In the end, it wasn't the shouting that won. It wasn't the hashtags or the rallies or the viral speeches. It was the evidence, the quiet, stubborn, damning truth. And for once, the truth didn't lose.